This won't be my usual video. It's gonna be a mix of rant, review, recommendation, and defense to mark the beginning of 2018. Now, I know that this year's had a rough start thanks to this racist bastard, but in terms of anime, it had a good start, with Netflix finally making a decent adaptation. That being said, a lot of things have been changing so early in the year. Some were disappointing, while some were satisfying. But there was one change that I noticed in the anime industry, and it revolves around one term: underrated. A lot of discussions regarding anime include certain genres or certain series or anime itself not getting the credit it deserves, leading to a desire for change. And the community is taking action for that reason. And that's what I want to discuss in this video: the notion that anime might be underrated. To start things off, I have a little announcement. The channel is finally gaining a lot of views, but some of my videos aren't exactly getting as much as the others, specifically anime roundups. It barely gets any views despite dedicating so much time into making those, and videos which don't take much time to make, like anti-related videos, are gaining more attention, which is understandable, but still. And so I decided to stop making anime roundups for a while because it's underrated. Let's talk about the main focus, and I mean anime. Thanks to the internet, anime has grown in popularity compared to decades ago. Back then, when people talk about anime, they would tell you it's childish and that you should watch something more mature. Fast forward decades later, and you have everyone starting talking about Attack on Titan the same way they do with Game of Thrones. And with the help of online streaming distributors like Netflix and Crunchyroll, the media was able to spread to a bigger audience in different countries. But not all countries. This privilege is limited to specific countries due to licensing, localization, and other various factors. Crunchyroll might be a good streaming service in the West, but here in the East or other parts of the world, we can only watch it on TV or find clips on YouTube, or most commonly, resort to piracy. So while the media is gaining popularity, the way it's distributed is quite a miss. Now, don't get me wrong, I can see how streaming sites like Crunchyroll are trying their best to reach out to as many people as possible. They test out different approaches and strategies to advertise their platform. One example of these strategies is the Crunchyroll Anime Awards. To those not familiar, the Anime Awards is an event where anime watchers from around the world get to vote the anime of the year and other categories that nobody really cares about. And the winners of each category get a pat in the back. I don't really know. They don't say. Regardless, it was an interesting premise. Then it screwed itself up. Seriously though, last year's Anime Awards sucked. The nominations for each category were unorganized and very biased, without any defense against trolls or fujoshis. It also didn't include niche anime or anime series from other streaming service providers, showing that the most popular anime equals to the best anime, which is not always the case. And this caused a buzz in the anime community, leading reviewers and YouTubers to criticize the flawed system. Of course, they weren't all bad-mouthing and death threats. Some stated valid points in their arguments, like choosing qualified judges, adding more categories and nominees, partnering with other streaming sites, and not just focus on the most recent seasonal anime series. Heck, I gave my own opinion last year and stated that it was only an experiment, and stating that the first try isn't always gonna be flawless. Fast forward to the current year and we have an Anime Awards more promising than before, fixing previous faults and following fan feedbacks. But is it flawless? Well, I wouldn't say so. For one, There were shows which needed a category of their own, like Best Fantasy for example, even though 80% of the fantasy anime that came out were crappy. There's also the dilemma of Koi no Katachi being the only nominated film in Best Animation. Now, I don't think it's fair for a movie to be in this category given that a lot more time and budget is given for films, and thus blowing the other competitors away. I also have to mention that not all categories were open during voting. Some were still unavailable despite announcing that voting begins during January of this year. But doesn't really make any sense because they also close it without telling us when it would close, which is kind of confusing. But I can understand why they did this, so I really won't complain too much about it. Lastly, there were potential shows that came out last year which weren't nominated. Now, I'm not saying that the current nominees aren't deserving, no. I personally enjoyed each of them and I think that they're deserving for each given spot. But it kind of gives the impression that these shows were the only good shows during 2017. And so, good shows which aren't as popular aren't getting the credit that they deserve, despite having potential, making them underrated. For the sake of exposure, I want to share what I think were the underrated series of 2017. You can treat this as a recommendation or just a list of shows you might have missed during 2017. For winter 2017, we have Akiba's Trip, which was based off a game of the same name. Its absurd humor and use of popular references deserved at least a nomination as Best Comedy. There was also Urarame Rocho, which was visually appealing and attempted to implement a shonen-style plot structure in an oriental fantasy setting. I wouldn't go so far as to say it should be nominated as Best Slice of Life, but it's underrated nonetheless. For spring 2017, we have Warao Salesman You, a dark comedy about a salesman who grants a person's desires with all of them facing the consequences of their own greed. Because of its twisted comedy, I can pretty much see why it didn't get nominated as Best Comedy. But I still think it deserves a bit more attention. And the opening was lit as hell. Hinako Note was also a show that I was surprised wasn't the talk of the town. It's about a girl who freezes up when talking to strangers. At first, I thought it was a normal reaction for most people to dismiss an anime like this because it's pretty much CGDCT, aka cute girls doing cute things. But then Blend S came into the picture and everyone suddenly loved the idea of girls acting weird in front of strangers. Maybe it was the opening. I don't know. The point is, if you like Blend S, you should totally give this one a shot. Summer 2017 had a lot of great shows, both popular and underrated. One of which was Keppetiranshi, Aoyama-kun. It's about a germaphobe in a soccer team and other crazy antics surrounding him. I think the reason why people ignore this series is because they thought it was a sports anime. But I am telling you right now, it is a full-on comedy anime. It's Sakamoto levels of funny, which, in my opinion, is at least enough for a nomination. While we're talking about sports, there's also Nanamare Sanbatsu. You like shonen? You like quizzes? Oh, here you go. Watch it. Not as thought-provoking as Sankatsu no Lion, but thought-provoking nonetheless. There was also Yokai Apartment no Yuga na Nichijou, which I'm surprised wasn't mentioned in the Slice of Life category. If there was a deserving nominee, it should have at least been this one. And don't even get me started with 18 If, because while it may not have been as good as Made in Abyss or Hoseki no Kuni in terms of animation, it still had the potential to at least get a nomination. But I'm just glad Kado the Right Answer got a nomination. That's one underrated anime out of the picture. Lastly, let's take a look at last season's underrated series. There was Konohana Kitan, with its exquisite animation and accurate representation of Japanese folklore. A show which I was sure Gaijin Goomba would have made a video about or something. There was also Anime Gataris, which was the love child of Gintama and Osomatsu-san. But I'll let this one slide because it literally was an elitist anime about anime elitists, so unless you're a seasonal watcher, you won't understand why it's entertaining. Lastly, there's Itsudatte Bokura no Koe wa 10cm datta, a 6-episode series based off on your work's songs. But again, I'll let this one slide because it was kinda late for the party and everyone already had a decent amount of titles on their watching list. I know I kinda sound like an elitist after a painful breakup while introducing these shows, but I just wanted to show how many shows there were in 2017 that a lot of people brushed off. I mean, this wasn't the only year when good shows became underrated. Not just within the niche of anime, not just within the niche of animation in general, not just within the niche of films or any form of entertainment. Underrated media is just too underground that it won't get any awards anytime soon, be it the Anime Awards, the Grammys, or even the Oscars. But I will say this, a form of media will remain underrated unless someone steps up and take action. And when someone does, it can either build a positive consideration or lead to a chaotic backlash. So don't let those awards force you into consuming something that you aren't interested in. Just keep liking what you like, even if it's underrated. Because it's when you realize that you found a treasure. And it's treasure that means so much more to you than anyone else. Just find your treasure, and it'll be all worth it. Anyways, that's the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed and I hope you learned a thing or two, and if you did, leave a like and also subscribe on there for more videos like this. As always, this is Vanilla, not the flavor, but just the sweet.